David Foster Wallace predicted in the early 1990s that video calling was going to devastate our mental health. And here in 2024, all of Wallace's predictions came true. And all of you guys have been prisoners to FaceTime before. Your mom, your girlfriend, someone at work even is calling you on FaceTime and you're obligated to answer. And a FaceTime call is a much more intimate, engaging, and psychologically taxing form of communication when compared to the classic phone call. And today we're going to explore Wallace's thoughts on this at length. And if you guys don't already know, my name is Ian, and here on Right Conscious, we cover everything related to David Foster Wallace. I already have in the playlist down below 80 videos on Wallace, and that is growing daily. So if you want more videos like this and deep dives into Wallace's books like Infinite Jest and others, subscribe to the channel and let us get started. So I don't know if you know this, but in the early 1990s, IBM made a dramatic push to bring videophony, whatever you want to call it, into the public technological space. And they offered this video calling device that in today's money costs around $3,500. And so it was mostly for upper middle class, upper class, and corporate type people. And somewhat surprisingly, it bombed. It had little to no success. Obviously, there were technical problems, but there were much bigger problems that we're going to be exploring today that made the almost entirety of its users want to go back to classic telephone calling. And so when it comes to FaceTime, a lot of us never really had a choice to FaceTime or not, because in 2010, FaceTime was released on the iPhone 4. And you guys probably remember it was pretty glitchy. It had problems, but now it is perfect. And the original incentive of FaceTime was that you were going to be able to see someone when you were talking to them. So most of us don't live in our same hometown with our parents and our siblings and all our old friends. And so sometimes you want to see what they're up to. You want to see their house and what they look like. And FaceTime makes that way easier. But there is a dark side of FaceTime, because I'm not really going to talk about today the controlling aspects of FaceTime, because I have a friend, really an acquaintance now, and he married an absolutely insane woman, and she tracks his location at all times. And when he's driving to go to the store or do something, he's on FaceTime. When he's at work, he's on FaceTime. And it's because she's scared that he's going to go sleep with someone else, even though he's never cheated on her and only been with a couple people in his life, while she has been with hundreds of people in her life. Anyway, in chapter 13 of Infinite Jest, and I'm not going to be spoiling anything, Wallace explores the theme of isolation at a deep level. And that's what a lot of new readers don't understand about Infinite Jest. They read it and it's complicated, it's not in chronological order, and they struggle to understand that there are certain sections and chapters that explore one theme. And that's what's connecting everything. Some of these stories may never get touched on or completed again, but they're adding to a mood. It's almost a vibe when you were reading Infinite Jest. And he goes on this long rant about why almost everyone prefers telephone calls to FaceTime calls. And that when people switched to video calling, they started to become more self-conscious and depressed individuals. And what's funny about today's society is that, FaceTime is released in 2010. Skype hit 115 million users in 2007 and was kind of the big thing back in my day, and that's how you video called people. But also in that era, smartphones, social media, Red Dye 40, so many other toxins and problems, big government getting involved with big data, so many other things happen that it's somewhat hard to create a direct link. Like that made us depressed because seemingly everything wasn't good for our own mental health. But Wallace says we prefer phone conversations because, quote, it lets you enter a kind of highway hypnotic, semi-attentive fugue. It allowed you to believe you were receiving somebody's complete attention without having to return it. Because we do this all the time. When you're on a phone call, I space out all the time. Someone's talking to me, yada, yada, yada. They're telling me about drama and this and that. And I could be taking a walk. I may be doing something for work. I usually work out and I'm stretching when I take a phone call from someone. And I may be paying attention 20%. But when it's my turn to talk, I'm speaking in a complicated manner, in a fast way. And I feel like they are glued to the phone, like you guys hopefully are glued to the phone right now watching me. And they're like, what's the next thing Ian's going to say? But in reality, they're probably screwing around too. And this is so bizarre because when you look back, this is what people thought. But this is a, quote, irrational, almost literally fantastic. It would be like being able to both lie and trust people at the same time. But now when you have a video call happening, you have to pay attention, because if you are stretching, if you are doing something or spacing out, then you appear like a child. Why aren't you listening to me? And let's be honest, most people aren't that entertaining. And people get mad at me on this channel all the time when I talk about the everyday common person. But if you are not actively pursuing a growth-oriented lifestyle, then the only thing you have to talk about is what is happening horizontally around you, what's going on in the town around you, gossip, the politics, sports, all the really boring, shallow stuff. And I'm fine with talking about that stuff in the world, at my job, or at a random social event, or at the grocery store, or whatever, for a little while. But having to hold me captive on a FaceTime call where we discuss these things that make my brain feel like mush, because it's not just that the topics are shallow, it's that the analysis is shallow. We can look at sports and look at the psychology of sports and why people care, or these things, or politics, and talk about the evolution of the Democratic Party in America, or whatever, and have at least a decent time. But most Americans don't read a book after high school. And this is most apparent when I talk to distant relatives or old friends for a while on FaceTime, because there's a certain energy when you're with the crazy relative or the old friend in person. You can start to vibe with each other because you've known them for a long time. And that's what makes it fun. The personality and the connection, the third mind and body that you two create. But over FaceTime, that doesn't really exist. And let me give you guys some unsolicited advice right now. Change your phone number. If you've had the same phone number for more than a couple years, my God, please change it. I've made it, and this is pretty crazy, so that less than 10 people know my phone number total. I make people email me or do WhatsApp, which I don't even have on my phone. I have it on a computer. And it's not because I don't want to be neighborly or be a good relative or a good friend. It's because the technological commitment that we now face as a friend or a relative with people through our digital devices has heightened. People are sending me videos and memes and messages and wanting to FaceTime, wanting immediate gratification to whatever obligation or thing they want me to go and do with them. And they know I'm seeing it, and they know I'm ignoring them. As back in the day, someone would have to either call you on the phone and go to a message machine. You can make it up an excuse, or they'd have to come to your house and physically talk to you. And I've found it's much easier in person to give people a vibe check, to let them know like, hey, I really don't want to be doing this right now. And they kind of get the picture and take that step back. But most of you guys have a phone where a bunch of people, if we were going to rate everyone in your life 1 through 10, like with how wholesome they are in your subjective perspective, almost everyone in your contact list or who you talk to is under an 8, probably under a 7. And we've become so weak through these digital social obligations that we just put up with these people. And when you have this obligation, it's this open loop in your brain. It starts to make you more stressed. It starts to make you more unhappy eventually, because you have to end up doing a bunch of BS that you don't want to do. You have to keep putting on the mask every single time you get on the FaceTime call or even text message. As with the phone, what makes phone calls interesting is that some of the people in that 10 list are people who I almost feel obligated to talk to for whatever reason, family, people at work, or whatever. And if I just get them on a phone call, I take a walk. I get my 12,000 steps in, listen to a little bit, look at the trees, yada, yada, yada. And maybe that's narcissistic, but in the attention economy where anybody and everyone is trying to capture, including me right now, with you, you have to be a warrior. You have to really choose wisely with what you are doing. And so we have now kind of just discussed the first aspect about why video calling makes you unhappy, is that because you can no longer hide and not listen during a phone call. And so the second thing that happened is that you had to start worrying about your appearance on the phone. And so when you're FaceTiming, as you saw in the thumbnail, you have your little image down in the bottom and then the big image of the person who's talking to you. But I have been a public school teacher for the past 7 years. And let me tell you guys some horrifying information. Sometimes in class with 5 minutes left, I maybe should have an activity and fill those last 5 minutes. But some days time runs out. I have nothing. I'm like, okay, you guys can do what you want for 5 minutes. And that's the biggest mistake you can make as a teacher. Something I don't try and do ever. But I see kids FaceTiming sometimes, and almost 9 out of 10 times when these kids are FaceTiming, they don't have the person they're talking to big. They have themselves blown up and they're looking at themselves. And as the person's talking, they're kind of looking at themselves. And I could see that sometimes the other person is doing that too. And FaceTiming has overwhelmingly, including the selfie camera, front facing camera, increased, our self-consciousness, just being able to look at yourself, because the megapixels on these cameras are really good and it really doesn't depict your exact experience. And when you start dealing with filters and visual enhancements, like for instance, on Zoom or on a lot of calls, you can have something that would like fix this discoloration on my face right now. But I'm a 31-year-old man who's been through some shit. I've never worn sunscreen. I'm going to have some discoloration on my face. I didn't stay inside my entire life like a little pansy boy on the computer. And Wallace talks about how a lot of these people started to hang hooks so they'd get a visually enhanced image of themselves and they'd hang it in front of the camera for times when they didn't want to be on camera so that you could see this better image of yourself. But people would get caught in this trap where then they'd feel an obligation when they got back on the call, to look as good as they do in that image. And this is actually what happens with profile photos. A lot of our profile photos are the best photos we have of ourselves. I mean, that's what we generally do. If it's, if you have a personal photo. And so like the right conscious profile picture that you guys are seeing below, I'm in the corner of a room with these bookshelves that help the dimension. I got this bright ass light on. I got my hair up in the bun, got the crystals on, all this stuff. And it's a pretty decent image. But some people feel like they need to live up to that image. And when they get onto a FaceTime, they need to have their makeup done and their hair done. I'm sure if you've ever dated before or done like online dating, you match with someone on Tinder or Bumble. And this is never really a good approach where you're like, hey, if they're like reluctant about meeting, like, hey, let's hop on a FaceTime call, like ease the tensions a little bit. And before that FaceTime call, you probably did at least something to make your appearance look better. I remember I got on one of those calls one time and I'm talking to this chick and we're going and talk for like 45 minutes. And like, we got to the point where I was like, okay, I'd like to meet up with this girl. Like, seems cool. But then I was like, I got to go to work. I got to get ready. I got to do stuff. And she's like, you can't go yet. I'm like, what? She's like, you think you can go? Why do you think you can go? And she starts like yelling at me and she's like, yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, she's like, you should be talking to me as you're going to work. And like, we've been texting for like 30 hours at that point. And so I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I got to take a shower, but I'll call you back as soon as I'm done. Block, I'm out of there. Your boy went ghost on. So I was about to start just saying derogatory terms. And circling back to the idea of not feeling like the idea that you can talk to someone and they'll listen to you, but you don't have to listen to them. The phone really kind of accentuates this idea of connected loneliness, which has problems, but is somewhat effective. Many of you guys have engaged in a parasocial relationship with me where you've maybe watched 50 hours of my videos, but I have no idea who you are. And if you want to get to know me, I host daily office hours, an Infinite Jest course, an Infinite Jest book club, a book club where we read 8 to 10 books a month, a writing group, and post all my writing over on the writeconscious Substack. I'm trying to build the most active booktuber literature community online right now by doing 3 different things. First of all, by talking to you daily, by meeting with readers and writers who have questions for me or just want to hang out. Second, I am reading 8 to 10 books a month with a group because most book clubs don't read enough. They read too fast, or you're just not interested in what they are doing. And third, I am helping activate readers and writers by creating groups and courses to help you guys excel in your journey. So if that sounds like something that interests you, there is a link down in the description below. We are currently doing an Infinite Jest book club and course. I post over an hour of content on Infinite Jest every single week, and I'm going to continue the Infinite Jest book club and course with subsequent rereadings and course material for years to come. So I would love to see you over there, and let me get back to my thought. So when you're engaging in a parasocial relationship with me, it's kind of nice. You get some value out of me. I get some value out of you, maybe watching my videos, subscribing to the channel, maybe joining the Substack, but that's the end of the line. However, if you were my friend, if you were my best friend, or we were chatting all the time, you might when you wake up at 7 a.m, have 20 schizo messages from me talking about some crazy theory that I'm thinking about. I have multiple friends who have me on mute because of that. And that's not as bad anymore, but I used to stay up to like 6 a.m. every single day for years. And my friends were kind people who kept their notifications on. So when someone hit them up, like their girlfriend or their mom, they got to see it immediately. Not me. I'm also very like active in asking questions about what you're doing. Like I'm a hawk. When I don't ask how you are, I ask, how are your goals going? When are you going to get that done? And then and if you don't give a good enough answer, it's going to be a therapy session, because I like to be around people who are doing something. It's really easy to go make friends with people who aren't making creative contributions in the world. You just go to the grocery store, ask anyone to be your friend. But people who are actually using their mind and trying to discipline themselves, that's really hard to do. But the more people you are around like that, the faster you're going to excel. That's what I found even with the writing group on the Substack. I have all these people around me who are posting poems every single day. So sometimes it's like 10 at night. I'm like, shit, should I go to bed? It's like, no, I got to do this right now, even if it sucks. And sometimes I've sat down when I feel tired and terrible, and I just write like one of the best poems I've ever written. Other nights I write ones that suck, but every once in a while that effort pays off. What Wallace also talks about is that when you start to see yourself on camera, you don't trust yourself as much anymore. And this is actually kind of interesting. He says that, quote, 60% of people felt like they looked untrustworthy, unlikable, or hard to like on video. And we have a really big self-conscious and self-esteem problem here in America. I have so many students who are like this. Like people say, it's so interesting how people talk about themselves, because even if you look creepy and weird, and you kind of know you look creepy and weird, you shouldn't say that, because that will just further reinforce people's perception of you. There really is some weird magic to how people look, that is determined by their belief system. This is just obvious. If you're super stressed and like worried all the time, you're going to look different over the course of 20 years than someone who's in Hawaii doing yoga every day. Take the same person and you put them on two different life paths, they're going to look totally different. But I think the axiomatic priming for all that comes with how you view yourself. And when I think of future courses and things I'll do for writers and like personal development that I've done for myself, then one of the first things I teach my students and the thing about myself is, what titles have I been given? Like all you guys at some point in your life have been given a title. Maybe you were a jock, a stoner, a loser, a creep, whatever. And what's crazy is that a lot of people carry those titles for the rest of their lives. I know guys in high school who were given titles that didn't really reflect who they are, and 13, 14 years later, they still carry that with them. And they're successful men. And the best part about life is that you get to pick the titles. You get to pick and can kind of manipulate and think about what you want people to think of you as. If I didn't want you guys to think that I was kind of random and schizo and all over the place and high energy and optimistic and these types of things, I would sit like a loser behind video essays and say, I'm going to write my script for 2 weeks. It's like college essay writing. I'm going to sit and be a video editor and then release my video that everyone's going to love. Instead of rain or shine, getting on the microphone, just like I have to do 180 days of the year at my job and speak to you guys about a certain topic. There are going to be some days that I suck. And what's so funny is that some of my most successful videos in terms of views are like, was on 2 hours of sleep. I was like, I'm going to make a video just to make it. And suddenly it blows up. And now I get I'm reading the comments from like 3 years ago, from a video from 3 years ago. And they're like, this sucks. But we do start to become more self-conscious of ourselves. And this is something that I've really noticed with actually being a YouTuber. So if you go back to videos that were before 2003, I was using a $350 DSLR camera, and the thing didn't focus. I'd have to have this stick I'd hold over and push the half focus button down. I had to be in the perfect angle with the perfect lighting, and just to get to focus on me. And if I moved out of the camera at all, it would lose focus. And I'd have to focus again. And so it was a nightmare. And so some of my videos, if you go and watch, I'm like out of focus at the start of the video or sometimes in the middle of the video, and it was a disaster. And so I had to have like the video screen pointed back at me, and then on my computer screen, like me talking, so I could always see when I was getting out of focus. But then when I got a new camera where I could do whatever I want and it will generally remain in focus, I still had that habit of having it turned back. And eventually I was like, you know what? I'm just going to turn this away from me. I'm just going to look at this camera lens. And when I started to do that, my productivity skyrocketed, how I felt about myself, all these different things. And sometimes I show it to these videos, I'm a little bit grubby. My hair may be greasy. I just woke up. I usually wake up at 4 a.m. It's like 4:20. I'm like tired, but I don't even see myself. But sometimes I forget to turn the screen back around because I'm moving the camera or doing something. So I see myself talking, and it immediately makes me self-conscious. It ruins everything. It actually happened today because I'm here visiting my parents. And so I had to like work out the camera angle and stuff. And I could see if you've had a hard life, if you didn't have a good armor psychically surrounding you, that it could start to affect you. That's looking at yourself in the camera too much could be a really weird kind of drive for you, because we've also been socially isolated in so many weird ways. Because I grew up in Vegas, and I knew a lot of guys who were in the pickup artist scene. And there's this one guy I have particularly in my head. His first name is Nick. And Nick was 5'4", 200 pounds, no muscle, didn't have the best skin, didn't have that great of style, honestly. And if you took a photo of him, or if he was just taking photos of himself and putting it on Facebook or MySpace, I'm sure he wouldn't feel very confident about himself. If he just was judging himself on appearance forever, he would become more unhappy every single year, especially as Instagram and all the perfect people out in the world started to kind of come into his life through, social media. But instead, Nick has a supreme confidence about him. I have seen him while out in Las Vegas talk to and get phone numbers from, and eventually, according to him, and I 100% believe him, have sex with some of the most beautiful women that you guys can imagine. That out here on the West Coast, it's much better than over in Podunk, Nebraska with snow monsters or South Kakalaki Sea Titans. That's not happening. But just through pickup artist wizardry and whatever else he was doing, I've seen him do that. But if he was judging himself solely on appearance and believing the camera, and at one point he wasn't confident, and then he started joining, there are groups in Vegas where you go out and learn to pick up women, because it's really kind of an easy thing to do because there are all these women always on the strip. And so you could just go out there and practice unsuccessfully for a while. But, probably in your town, if you go out and do that, you're going to start running out of people at some point. There's not too many fresh people. And if you're in a really small town, you'll get through all the people really fast, and then they'll tell their friends, and suddenly you're the town creep. And let's contrast that. That guy I told you guys about earlier, who's tracked down and all this crazy stuff. He is 6'3", very attractive in my estimation, has, a good job, had a good life, pretty smart, really funny, one of the funniest guys I grew up with. But his parents really didn't let him go out very much, and he was addicted to the internet. He was always on computers and doing stuff, a part of chat groups, and he became super self-conscious about how he looked. When I talked to him, it's so weird. He mentions it even today. He's like, "Oh, my ears look really small on camera." And he talks about how he can't do certain things. He'll be complaining about some part of his appearance. I'll be like, "Why don't you change that?" "Well, I can't do that. Then people would think I'm this or that." And lo and behold, he's married to a desert sand golem. And it's not like she has a great personality. As I told you guys, she is crazy. And every single time I talk to that guy now, he talks about killing himself. And I would connect a lot of this back to technology and seeing yourself on a screen and phones and all this type of stuff. And last but not least, Wallace makes a very interesting point, is that this video phone experiment back in the 1990s. So when everyone was done, so people would do it and they're like, I don't really like this. And so they would go back to the phone. But he cites some studies, and I actually read about them, and they're true, that the people who engaged in this and got into this and eventually gave it back up, because the technology eventually actually just kind of got abandoned, and so people just had to kind of leave it behind, they were statistically more reluctant to go out and re-engage in the world. Their personal life outside of phones and stuff actually declined after their use of video phone technology. And what was capitalized on by all these people who were at home and had money, because like I said, it's like the Apple glasses. And that's what's funny about IBM's vision, because I can, the Apple glasses are over $3,000 right now. Most of us did not buy them, and we think they're silly. But I think most of us could admit, that is the future, that one day you're not going to need a phone. You're going to have these glasses that can, put Ian on the screen as, someone's talking to you, and you can be listening to me, and, all the different things that we are told are going to happen with these glasses. But right now, with their limited features and this super high price point, it seems silly to us. But Wallace cites that the decline, the people who are using these glasses right now are mostly wealthy and are kind of the type of people who are into that, in that technology, are continuously moving away from society, from life. When you spend time in places like Bozeman, Montana, Los Angeles, Jackson, Wyoming, the wealthy parts of cities around you, you start to notice, and once you get to know people who are very wealthy, they have everyone take care of everything for them. I have a friend, and he has everything done for him: laundry, cooking. He has someone who puts gas in his car or charges their Tesla. He does nothing for himself anymore. The kids are taken care of. And he was telling me on one of his and his wife's date night recently, they were like, let's go to a store. So they went to a grocery store and were looking around and they're like, let's buy some stuff. And so they were buying some stuff and they go to the checkout line and he puts the basket on the counter. And, when it goes up to the lady and she's looking at him and they're standing there and he's like, is everything okay? And she's like, are you going to take the items out of the basket? And he was like, oh, wow, I'm sorry. But he said he hadn't been in a store in like 4 years. And so he just forgot that that's what you were supposed to do. And he has the Apple glasses. But all the people who dropped out and got deeper into the technology in the 1990s, what did they grow? Well, they grew Amazon. And that's what Wallace wrote this in 1996. He said that this fallout created a new market for online delivery and shopping. Because you had all these sad people who didn't want to go out, who felt self-conscious. And what did they do to appease that? Retail therapy. And in the late 1990s, right there, eBay started to become big. Amazon didn't really become a big deal until like 2001. But online shopping did have this dramatic increase because of this. And has online shopping made your life better? It has in some ways. But just know every single time, someone sells something on Amazon, Amazon gets 8 to 45% of that item's profit. And would you rather be giving that to Jeff Bezos or, a local person who's, doing something similar for 50 cents more? I mean, and that's really shown our morals and how we've caved as a society, that corporations like Walmart and Amazon and these things have won just through the smallest convenience and like charging, $1 less or whatever, have just blown small businesses away. And this has probably led to a lot of the political radicalization. Because I've lived in small towns before, some that were very conservative, some that were very kind of mixed. Okay. So when I lived in Oregon, I was in this kind of small town and they voted about 50% Republican, 50% Democrat. It was a pretty cool town because I would go to this meditation group and this yoga group and they were all super liberal. They would be like, who was it at the time? I don't know. Mitt Romney is like the spawn of Satan and all this stuff. But they would be joking about it because I know all of them would have to go to stores and they all knew people who were Republicans and they didn't hate them. But we could compare that today where there are people who won't go travel to California if they're Republicans or Florida if they're Democrats just because that's, those states are politically polarized in one direction, even though they're not. Then we are also becoming, that's creating more and more unhappiness. And what's also weird about FaceTime, and not to get too elitist here, is that every fucking doodah out there, every fucking Dumbo has access to a front-facing camera now and can get online and say something. And I love, an anarchist, libertarian approach to the internet and social media. I don't necessarily believe TikTok is bad. It's just a medium for information like anything else, just like YouTube. But whatever vision you want to think about, other than just like neoliberal, just like whatever we're doing, just free-falling, and just trying to sustain the system and not worry about what our kids and our grandkids are going to have to deal with. But if you have a vision for a libertarian, a Marxist, an anarchist, a democratic socialist, a Christian nationalist, whatever society, that vision is rooted in education, having a populace that can basically self-regulate and sustain that. Especially with social media, because back in the day, we would have these leaders. I mean, a lot of the people would be illiterate or wouldn't care, but they would find these symbols, these icons who did have ideas, and we would get behind them. But now with access to information and because the Dunning-Kruger effect, democracy is a joke. Most people are right here at the peak, everyone. They've gained a little bit of knowledge, and they are supremely confident, and they never want to escape that. And social media platforms and society in general is not incentivizing us to become cultured or become experts because people start claiming you're a know-it-all. You guys have experienced this. Most of you guys have moved past this, and it hasn't been an easy experience for you. And so the majority of social media and information getting put out there are people who are ignorant and at the top of that peak. And it's not like they're on their journey. It's not like they're saying, like I do a lot of the time, hey, I'm not Cormac McCarthy. I'm not the foremost expert on writing, but I publish my writing daily and I'm on this journey with you guys. And 10 years from now, I'm going to be a lot better than I am now. So come along with me on my journey to becoming an expert. And last but not least, I'd like to talk about one of my favorite things that we discuss on this channel, and that is longing. That FaceTime reduces the amount of longing that you can do, because when you look at relationships in time memoriam, there was this heavy aspect of longing in the classic world, because let's say you fall in love with someone, or you know you're going to get married to someone, and maybe you've met them before, but you don't have immediate access to them, first of all, because they're not going to allow you to be together and have sex. But what if she lives a couple of valleys away? And you know that in a couple of years you're going to marry her. Well, you're going to be thinking about each other, but but you don't have any access. And maybe this is before letters. And so where would that energy go? Well, you'd be out working. You'd be out at night looking at the stars, connecting their vision with nature. And it would grow in you, and this longing would grow in this beauty. And then that tension, finally, when you two would come together, would help the relationship last longer. And we don't have that at all anymore. I remember in high school, I had like a long distance relationship for a little bit. Terrible idea. And we would sit on FaceTime with each other all day. And eventually, back to earlier points, it got really boring and really weird and super self-conscious. But it killed any need to long for each other because we were always with each other. And eventually, in my opinion, the relationship imploded because of that. And so now kids can talk to their dad who's on deployment, but then it's just dad's on deployment. They are not as happy when he comes back anymore. All throughout history, dads had to leave home and go to war and go and do something. Your siblings did. And so these types of calls, FaceTime, ruins that physical reaction when you finally can see something. Because with telephone calls, you can't see them. You can't see their evolution. Same in letters. You can't hear their voice or see them. And so I think it's a really sad state that we've come to. And when I look to the future with AI video conferencing like Lex Friedman and Mark Zuckerberg were doing and other things, it's really a hollow existence that I'm not excited for. And so I love each and every one of you. I hope that you guys can engage in as many social interactions in person as you can, and maybe, some classic phone interactions where you're reading a book, cleaning your house, doing some stuff as someone is just talking, you're off into oblivion, because that's one of the best pastimes in life.